I still remember the day it all began, the day I realized my loyalty to the company was just another line on their budget spreadsheet. They called me into the manager's office with that fake smile and the rehearsed speech, "Your position is being restructured, but don't worry, we need you to train your replacement." I stared at them, heart pounding, as if my life had paused mid-beat. Train the person who would take my job? The very role I had built from scratch over years? I could feel the tension knotting in my shoulders, the unfairness of it slicing through me. Yet, something inside me clicked. I decided, if they wanted me to teach someone else how to replace me, I would do it, my way. I would comply. Fully. But I wouldn't make it easy. Every undocumented shortcut I had discovered, every overlooked flaw, every tiny loophole I had learned the hard way, I would expose it. Every misstep, every inefficiency, every system glitch that no one had ever noticed before. And I would make sure the new me couldn't survive without it. They thought they were getting a smooth transition. They didn't know I was about to turn their plan upside down. The morning started like any other, but I couldn't shake the feeling that everything had changed. I walked into the office with a calm smile, coffee in hand, while my mind was already running through every detail of the day ahead. My replacement, a fresh-faced college grad with big eyes and an even bigger sense of enthusiasm, was waiting at their desk, beaming as if this was the opportunity of a lifetime. "Hi. I'm really excited to get started," they said, voice full of hope. I nodded, keeping my expression neutral. "Great. Let's dive in," I said, leading them through the first steps. At first, it was all surface-level tasks, showing them the email systems, the scheduling software, the daily reports. I explained every button, every tab, every hidden menu, but I made sure to sprinkle in the quirks no one had documented. "Oh, don't forget," I said casually, "sometimes the report generator crashes if you try to pull more than 50 entries at a time. Nothing serious, just a tiny inconvenience." I watched their eyebrows raise slightly, and I smiled, innocently. By lunchtime, I had already started introducing the subtle chaos. I taught them the workarounds I had invented over the years, each one a double-edged sword. They saved time but depended on my personal knowledge. I even highlighted the gaps in the company's system, the errors that management had always ignored. "Yeah, if you don't double-check the client codes here, the whole spreadsheet can go sideways," I said, as if giving a helpful tip. And every time they nodded, eagerly scribbling notes, I felt a thrill. This wasn't me being petty, it was me leveling the playing field. I was giving them knowledge, yes, but also responsibility for things no one else had taught them. By the end of the day, my replacement was exhausted, overwhelmed, and slightly anxious, exactly as intended. I walked back to my desk, sipping my coffee, feeling a mix of satisfaction and anticipation. Tomorrow, we would dive even deeper, and that's when the real fun would begin. The second day began with a sense of quiet anticipation. My replacement arrived full of energy, armed with a notebook and a determination I secretly found amusing. They still thought they were stepping into a well-oiled machine. I smiled inwardly, they had no idea. We started with more complex tasks. I walked them through the workflows I had built over years, carefully highlighting every shortcut I had relied on. "Here's a neat trick to make the database run faster," I said casually, showing a workaround I knew was unstable. "Just don't touch this too much, or the system gets weird." By mid-morning, they were already running into minor errors. Every crash, every unexpected glitch, every confusing form they had to fill out, I had subtly introduced them all. I kept my tone patient, helpful, professional, the perfect mentor. But inside, I was watching the cracks form like a slow-motion demolition. When we reached the reporting system, I deliberately showed them the exceptions I had discovered but never reported. "Oh, sometimes the invoices don't match the client entries," I said. "It's rare, but it happens. Just double-check each one." I watched as panic flickered across their face. They realized this wasn't as simple as they had been told. During lunch, they tried to ask questions about why some processes were inconsistent. I nodded sympathetically, giving answers that sounded plausible but left gaps. "It's just how things have always worked," I said. "Management hasn't updated this in a while, but you'll get the hang of it." By the end of the day, they were drained. They were still trying, still eager, but I could see the uncertainty creeping in. And that uncertainty was exactly what I wanted. I wasn't being cruel, I was exposing the truth. If they couldn't handle this, it wasn't their fault, it was the system's fault. And soon, management would feel the consequences too. By the third day, the cracks were becoming impossible to ignore. My replacement arrived with a forced smile, still trying to convince themselves they could handle everything I had shown them. I greeted them warmly, but inside, I was ready to let the dominoes fall. We began with the more advanced reporting tasks. I explained the calculations, the cross-checks, the exceptions, every nuance I had painstakingly discovered over the years. I pointed out potential pitfalls, but in each case, I left a tiny, almost invisible trap. A misplaced formula here, an unlogged process there. Nothing overt, just enough to confuse someone unfamiliar with the system's quirks. Within hours, the first mistakes started appearing. Reports didn't balance, invoices were misfiled, and alerts that normally went unnoticed began triggering errors. I could see panic starting to creep into their eyes. "I don't understand." "I followed everything you said," they whispered, frustrated. I stayed calm, offering guidance and encouragement. "It's okay, these things happen," I said gently. But every tip I gave only highlighted the system's weaknesses further. Every correction required another layer of intervention, exactly as I had planned. By mid-afternoon, the replacement was visibly stressed. They started questioning basic procedures, second-guessing themselves at every step. I watched as the enthusiasm from day one vanished, replaced by uncertainty and anxiety. I couldn't help but feel a grim satisfaction. The company had wanted a smooth transition, but now they were witnessing the chaos I had quietly sown. By the time the workday ended, the replacement had made several errors that even management began noticing. Emails were sent back with corrections, clients had minor complaints, and whispers of inefficiency started circulating. I returned to my desk, pretending to be absorbed in my own tasks, but inside I was smiling. The plan was working. Tomorrow, things would get even more interesting. The system's flaws would no longer be hidden, and the replacement's confidence would begin to crumble entirely. By the fourth day, it was no longer subtle. My replacement, once eager and bright-eyed, was now tense and jittery. Each step seemed to require double, triple checks. Every report they produced carried a hint of error, small, almost insignificant mistakes that, when added up, created noticeable problems. Management had started noticing. Emails popped into my inbox. "Why are there discrepancies in the reports?" and "Client data seems off, please investigate." I read them calmly, sipping my coffee, while my replacement stared at their screen in a mix of confusion and dread. I continued the training, as if nothing was happening. Every time they asked a question, I gave an answer that sounded helpful but subtly shifted the responsibility back onto them. "Oh, yes, the system can be tricky sometimes, just make sure you cross-reference the client codes," I said with a reassuring nod. They nodded frantically, overwhelmed, and I let them struggle just enough. By mid-morning, the replacement had made a serious error. A report sent to a key client contained incorrect numbers. Panic set in. They came to me, voice shaking. "I don't know what went wrong. I did exactly what you showed me." I put a comforting hand on their shoulder. "It's okay. These things happen. This system isn't perfect, nobody's ever really trained for the full complexity. You'll get it with time." I smiled, but inside I was counting down the days until the cracks became impossible to ignore. By the end of the day, management had started holding urgent meetings, trying to figure out why the replacement was struggling so much. Emails and calls flew back and forth, but the answers were elusive. And I? I remained calm, professional, and helpful, all while watching the company's plan unravel. As the day ended, the replacement barely looked at me. Their defeat was palpable, their energy spent. I knew, deep down, this was it, they were on the verge of quitting, and the company was about to realize that the person they had dismissed was the only one who could keep everything running smoothly. It happened faster than anyone expected. By the 6th day, my replacement trudged into the office looking defeated. Their desk was cluttered with notes, printouts, and sticky reminders, all signs of a mind stretched too thin. I greeted them warmly, but they didn't return the smile. I can't do this anymore, they muttered, almost apologetically. I've tried, I really have, but I just can't handle it. I nodded sympathetically, the perfect mentor, the calm voice of reason. I understand, I said softly. It's a lot to take on. This system has quirks that even I had to learn the hard way. By mid-morning, HR had been alerted. The replacement formally submitted their resignation, citing stress and the overwhelming nature of the role. The office buzzed with whispers. Management scrambled to find answers, frantic to figure out what went wrong so quickly. I watched quietly as panic set in. Emails and calls flew back and forth. Managers who had dismissed my contributions suddenly realized how much of the workflow depended on my knowledge and experience. I kept my composure, walking past cubicles, answering questions politely, and pretending to be the steady hand in the storm, the very person they had tried to replace. By the end of the day, the office atmosphere was chaotic. The replacement was gone, and management was realizing the full extent of the gaps I had quietly exposed during training. I leaned back in my chair, sipping coffee, savoring the moment. The company had forced me to train someone to take my place, and they had learned, too late, that some things aren't replaceable. Tomorrow, the real reckoning would begin. They would have to face the consequences, and they would have to call me back. By the next morning, the office was in full-blown panic mode. Emails piled up, clients called with complaints, and managers ran from desk to desk trying to piece together what had gone wrong. The replacement's brief tenure had left the systems in disarray, mistakes mounting faster than anyone could correct. I arrived at my desk as usual, calm, collected, and completely in control. Colleagues gave me wide-eyed looks, a mix of relief and awe, knowing I was the only person who could fix the mess. Then came the call I had been waiting for, my manager, finally breaking their composed facade. "Can you come to the office immediately? We need you." The hesitation in their voice betrayed panic. I walked into the meeting room, coffee in hand, as if I hadn't been planning this for a week. They fumbled with their words. We underestimated how critical you are to operations," they stammered. "We realize now that replacing you was a mistake. Can you come back?" I paused, savoring the moment, letting them hang on my decision. "I can," I said slowly, "but only on my terms." I named my price: triple the salary, guaranteed control over my processes, and full authority to prevent such reckless restructuring again. Every word felt like a small victory, every stipulation a reminder of the respect they had never shown me before. They swallowed hard and agreed, desperate and humbled. I signed the papers, walked back to my desk, and settled in. Everything was as it should have been. The company had forced me to train my replacement, and in the end, I had turned their plan completely upside down. Sitting at my desk, sipping my coffee, I smiled to myself. I had played by their rules, followed their instructions, and in doing so, had won on my terms. The lesson was clear: never underestimate the person you try to replace. Weeks later, the office had returned to its usual rhythm, but the atmosphere had shifted. Management was more careful, more respectful. They knew now that experience, loyalty, and institutional knowledge weren't things you could just replace overnight. As for me, I settled into my role with renewed confidence. I wasn't just doing my job anymore, I was in control, valued, and finally recognized for the work I had always done. My replacement's brief tenure became a cautionary tale whispered among new hires, a reminder that some lessons are learned the hard way. Looking back, I couldn't help but smile. They had forced me to train my replacement, thinking it was a simple transition. But by following their instructions, and doing exactly what they asked, I had flipped the script entirely. In the end, I didn't just survive being replaced. I thrived. And the company? They finally learned the hard truth: never underestimate the person you try to replace.